And we are joined by South Dakota News Watch's Bart Pfankuch. And Bart, just to begin, let's just talk about South Dakota News Watch as a whole. Tell us a little bit about you guys and what it is you do. I'm sure people that are watching this right now read your articles.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me, first of all, Blake. I really appreciate it. So South Dakota News Watch formed in early 2018. We are a statewide nonprofit journalism organization. We're funded by individuals and community foundations and grants. We don't take any political or corporate money. And we publish stories of statewide interest, publish those on our website and social media. And then one of the cool things is we make that material available to all other media for use at no cost. So for every story we do, we send out a bulletin, and newspapers, TV, and radio stations can pull that material and use it. And so we get the word out on these important topics. And we've expanded to a staff now of 3. We're located across the state, and we're aggressively pursuing stories of public interest on a number of matters that hopefully we can enlighten and inform South Dakota public and policymakers to make better decisions about big topics. And that's really our goal.
And one of the things you just said there, and I don't know if you're comfortable speaking to this, but you don't take any political money. How important do you think that is for just getting down to the raw facts of some of these issues that you guys are covering?
Well, I don't want to say that a newspaper, which I worked for 25 years, that ran political ads was biased in favor of one candidate or another. I just think that in today's world, where the media has been under attack a lot, and there is a lot of partisan media, that it gives us, I think, an integrity leg, an additional leg of integrity to stand on. And so I don't think it's a huge deal. Obviously have been an unbiased journalist for 35 years now, and even when I worked where they were taking money for political campaigns, it didn't influence our coverage. But I think now that being really supported from sort of the ground up financially is just one of the tenets of that we believe strongly in at Newswatch, and we've been able to make it so far.
I'm really happy to have you on. I think you guys do some of the best in-depth coverage. I mean, I've read some of your articles. I reread at least one of your articles today, going through some of the topics that we're going to be discussing today, and I'm just curious how much time goes into one of your articles, because you seem to come at these things with a lot of information. You know, we're in broadcast media. We do not have the time to allocate like you guys do to your articles. Today I was reading one. It was about the housing situation in Wall, and it starts off, and you're explaining the story of somebody who runs a business out there. She has to commute in from Rapid City, but then the story really develops from there and talks about it more as a macro and what the city leaders are doing. And the first thought I had was, how long did it take him to put this together?
You know, I don't know. There's no average, but you do have to sort of, there's times where you hustle, and you know about that, and then there's times where you sort of sit back and think. And journalism for me, when you do what I call enterprise, which is kind of a story that might not have gotten done if you hadn't been born, is one way to look at it. So it's a lot of you thinking about topics that matter and how to approach those and how to learn about them. But you know, when we started, we did 1 story a week, and they were very in-depth. But now we've expanded our staff, and we do 3 stories a week and 2 fact checks a week. So less time to do things. But you know, the Wall story, I went out there and spent you know, the better part of a day out there, and I probably worked on that 3 or 4 other days. You know, I've been doing it a long time, Blake, so you know, I know how to structure a story, but it does take time, and that I think is what, you know, our funders realize is, you know, in order to have experienced journalists working on real stories does take time, and it takes funding to do that. And so far they've supported us in that. But you know, there are some stories where you think about them when you get up in the morning, and you think about them when you're walking the dog, and hopefully you don't think about them when you're playing golf. But you're making dinner, and sometimes you run up to your office and you write part of a story because it just sort of comes together. But really, it's just from thinking about things a lot, and I think having conversations, you know, with my wife, who's a great supporter and a former journalist herself, and just thinking, I think of what do people want to know, what do they need to know next, and so that has served me well over time.
Well, you've tackled some pretty important issues here. We'll start with the water issue. This is what led me to calling you yesterday, and when we talked about this. I'm just curious what your report found. We'll begin there as far as water needs right now versus water supply. So water demand in our area versus water supply, and also if you found anything with future projections.
Yeah, so the pipeline issue has been sort of circulating or bubbling up since about 2019. And they've looked for evidence to show that the need is there, because there's a lot of people to convince and a lot of checkbooks to open up to get this thing, a $2 billion proposed pipeline built. But this latest study was a U.S. Geological Survey study. It was commissioned by the Western South Dakota Water District that's formed to support the pipeline project. But it found that the aquifers are not refilling at the rate that they need to in order to support the growth. So the Black Hills area has grown about 40% in the last 25 years. And so that has increased water demand, as you know, everyone can understand. The Black Hills is unique in a way because we don't have a lot of inflow sources. We don't have a Missouri River coming in. We don't have big rivers coming in. So we need rainwater to refill the aquifers that support our fresh and drinking water use. So when times of drought or long-term drought, that can become a big concern fairly quickly. So this survey found that they checked the Madison aquifer, that is the primary aquifer, in various areas, and the Minnelusan, and what they found was that it's not recharging as fast as it needs to keep up with growth. And that happens to be, which makes sense, in basically the area from Box Elder, roughly Ellsworth Air Force Base, all the way up to Sturgis. So those are, you've got Box Elder, Rapid City, Somerset is a big growing bedroom community, and all the way to Sturgis. And those are the areas that aren't refilling, and those are the areas where the need is the greatest. So it was just another piece of evidence, I think, from the standpoint of the people who support the pipeline project. Hey, we need to do this now. This isn't getting any better. In terms of projections, scientists are loath to make projections too far out because,
I'm sure part of that, they don't know what the growth is actually going to look like.
And are we headed to are we in a major drought right now? No, you couldn't convince anyone of that with all the rain we've had. But we're in sort of we're in a drought in the fall, and about every 80 years there's like a historic drought. And we're sort of at the 80-year mark from the last one. And so I think it was just another piece of evidence that supports, at least from their viewpoint, the concept of moving forward on a pipeline.
And I'm just reiterating here, so they really haven't been able to identify, okay, if we look at our current supply right now, what does our timeline look like to where we might be reaching a crisis point with the water supply versus the demand?
They actually have done that.
Oh, they have.
So there's a mine study that showed that at this point we could run low on water. Not all of a sudden the taps run dry, right? But we could run low on water right now in a drought, if it was an extended drought period with the current population. But in about 30 years or so, we could run short of water in a non-drought period. And the other thing that this study from USGS said was, we are not refilling in a non-drought period. So it was a little bit more urgency to that. But yeah, I think it's in about I think it's about 30 years where you reach this point where the demand exceeds the supply in a non-drought area. So
30 years, okay.
Yeah, so that has been looked at.
So that kind of provides you a timeline of when this pipeline would probably be optimal to get in by, if it's going to be something that the area needs.
Yeah, you and I, we might be dead before it comes up, so let's hope not.
Yeah.
I see you living to 100,
Well, I don't know if I do. I eat a lot of food out of a gas station, so we'll see how long I get, Bart. We'll shift gears here, because I know there's some other things that you guys have been covering. Can you talk about some of these other stories that you've been going in depth on?
Well, we've done a lot of, one of our roles is to watch what happens with government, not to draw, not to insert our opinion in it. And so we've covered a lot of the cuts that have come down, first from Musk and Doge, and now from the Trump administration. Their intention is to root out fraud and waste, and I think also align spending with the president's priorities. So that process, has tended to affect lower income people living on the margins. When you have less flexibility in your income or spending ability, a small change hurts you more. So, that's where these things have tended to land. And one of those is, the cuts to the Medicaid program. This is estimated from the Nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office to cut, $1 trillion. in the next decade or so. Well, that's going to boot people off the program. And part of that is work requirements, supported by, I know you had Congressman Johnson on here. He supports work requirements for Medicaid. That is the idea that more people who are getting free government health care would have to work in order to get that.
If I'm not mistaken, it'd be 20 hours a week, correct?
I think it depends. Yeah, but 20 hours a week is probably the minimum. But there's some paperwork concerns, and the bottom line is people are going to be kicked off of Medicare. Talking about 12 million Americans. I think a new estimate reported here recently is 13,000 South Dakotans. Well, why does that matter? I think it's two big places where that lands. First of all, individuals who lose their government health care will no longer have health care. And I think even with the outstanding plan that I'm sure KOTA offers you and the same thing that I have with South Dakota News Watch, we're already making decisions about what to get done and what not to have done. And, a lot of it's pocketbook driven. And so, if we lost our insurance, you and I, there's probably things we would put off. Maybe you don't get checked for prostate cancer or get a colonoscopy because it's going to cost you a lot of money. So what you'll see people who, and this comes from Wade Erickson, the CEO of Horizon Healthcare. It's sort of a quiet player in the healthcare field, Monument over here, Avera Sanford over on the east. This kind of covers the center part of the state.
A lot of the smaller communities,
yeah,
right?
a lot of I think 27 clinics in small towns. So he's basically saying that you're going to see people getting sicker and dying younger because they're not going to get the preventative care that allows you to treat these illnesses that are not, deadly at the beginning, but eventually get there. So that's one concern, is the health of these people. The other one is his institution, his healthcare system relies heavily on Medicaid. The Medicaid coverage, the Medicaid patients in some cases are 50% of their revenue. So you take that big revenue chunk out.
We say in some cases too. I just want to make sure I'm understanding this right. You're saying in some of the clinics it's 50%, or
in some of the hospitals, and rural hospitals as well. Not just these clinics, but rural hospitals also have, especially in rural and reservation areas, they have a high Medicaid and Medicare population. So you take some of that Medicaid funding out; those people don't get that care. You're going to see services that they can't provide. One notable example already is birthing services, and I did a piece about that where rural health systems are ending their birthing services. So now instead of being cared for by a doctor as an expectant mother goes through the 9 months of process keeping her and the baby safe, now they have to drive 100 miles on rural roads to give birth and or to see a doctor. So there have been clinics that in Winter, for example, and in Sisseton that have ended their birthing programs because it's too expensive, too much of relying on Medicaid, which doesn't pay the full freight. So Medicaid does not pay the full amount of the cost of a procedure. So not only is it not paying the full amount, but then you lose that. So real concerns about the ability of these facilities to exist in some cases. There are estimates about losing a couple hundred rural hospitals across the country, and we have had some. Well, we've had nursing home. That's the other side of the Medicaid. Is Medicaid patients also go in nursing homes, long-term care facilities, and they boost the bottom lines there, and so you pull those people out of there. They can't afford it. Maybe die younger, can't pay the bills. The long-term care facilities lose that revenue. And we have seen a number of long-term care facilities close in South Dakota. So it's a big issue. It's a big issue in the cities as well. But I focused in particular on the rural areas where, again, some of these things land a little harder.
Okay, so and we'll just do a reporter-to-reporter moment here. Sometimes as reporters, it's good to make sure we're on the same page here. So I just want to make sure I'm understanding what's going on from your reporting here. Is that one, you've got this element of people who are going to lose their Medicaid coverage, a big portion of this through the work requirements that were enacted through the big beautiful bill. On top of that, you've got this rural health system that a lot of its patients are relying on this. Therefore, through the transitive property, a lot of its funding are going into this system. And now this hospital group, can you remind me the name one more time?
Horizon Health.
Horizon Healthcare is saying, look, this may really hurt us as far as funding goes, and some of these clinics may close. Is that kind of the summary? And how worried are they that likelihood could come to fruition?
I think, looking back, when you talk, this is Wade Erickson, We're no longer catching chronic disease early to where they can be managed. There's a very good possibility that it could lead to people being more sick and also some people dying before they would otherwise. So when you have a hospital CEO saying those kind of statements to you on the record, on the phone, knowing they're going to be published across the state, I think it's pretty serious from his standpoint. And now I will say Congress did approve a stopgap, some money to help rural hospitals.
Like $50 billion,
Yeah,
correct?
but that's nationwide, and that's not gonna that's not gonna cover $1 trillion.
Yeah.
So that's here's a
Did
little
he-
something, but.
I'm curious if you have a quote from him on the actual potential closure of some of these medical centers. And the only reason I ask that is, there's been some speculation on that, and I'm really curious to see if there's any firsthand accounts that you've been given.
I think the reduction in services is more likely. I don't know that we've got hospitals that are in a position where they're so thin margined. They've all conglomerated into groups, and so they've got greater protection as a result of that. I think, Blake, the question is really, will they reduce services? And if you
And you're saying in a lot of this would be the preventative care, things that start early, that people, if they no longer have health care if they're no longer covered, they're not going to go in and get it looked at earlier in its prognosis.
Yeah, if you look at the birthing care, in order to actually work with an expectant mother, they had to have a nurse there, a certified nurse. Well, that means you have to have a nurse on staff for that program specifically. And nurses in rural areas are, doing 20 different kind of things and caring for patients with different needs. So that was an example where we just can't afford to have that nurse there full time in an era where we can hardly recruit anyone to come out to Winter or Miller, places like that, to begin with. The nursing shortage is real, so nurses can go anywhere. They get signing bonuses. I saw the monument billboards as I was driving in from my home. Come and work for us, nurses. We love you. We want you. Well, that's even harder when you're in a town of 3,000 and there's no Walmart or Costco and one restaurant or something like that. So that's the other part of that, is it's hard to get them and it's hard to keep them, and it makes it more expensive. So I think that's an example. Are we looking at imminent closures of healthcare facilities? I don't want to predict, but I don't think that that's really on the table right now. I think this is more of a slow burn.
Yeah.
And maybe a reduction in services.
Well, and I appreciate you, coming on and saying that, because I think, you see a lot of noise about this, and certainly you're highlighting concerns with people who, maybe are not going to seek the preventative care or the early care that you're talking about. But when you're talking about this issue, I think a lot of people really are curious, especially in South Dakota, and I'm sure it's probably a little bit different state to state, but at least here I've been wondering, if you were given any firsthand accounts of that. So I really appreciate your reporting there.
Well, I work hard not to get out too far on the fringes of issues. I mean, like I say, when you call a CEO and ask him how he's feeling about the Medicaid cuts in the reconciliation bill, and he goes off like that, I think it's important to report that. But no, I don't look to sort of pundits or people who are on the radical side or on either side of an issue. I try to not stick to the middle, but make sure that things are balanced, and some of that comes with experience and common sense. That there are always people you can call to spout off, especially in today's world.
Yeah.
You can get people to say anything. I never have played my game that way in journalism. I've never run my work that way, and so it's a natural fit for News Watch. But we're particularly sensitive to that in today's environment, I think.
One of the other things you talked about was the Doge cuts, that this was something that you had also covered. Were you ever able to identify, if you can't come up with a number off the top of your head, I get it, because I'm totally calling for a number here, but were you able to identify the number of people that were impacted by Doge cuts here in South Dakota?
That was so difficult. Things happened so quickly at first that it was really hard to. I wanted to stay away from sort of predictive things like this could do that, and the Medicaid cuts are a little bit like that. These are things that could happen. But no, it was, and it changed so often. I talked to people who lost their jobs, and then some of them got their jobs back eventually. Programs that were not funded, then eventually they were funded. I think it was just the way it was done. It was sort of taking a chainsaw, you remember Elon with his chainsaw, taking a chainsaw and then trying to put things back together in some cases. as opposed to, cuts that were made during the Clinton administration. They cut a lot of federal money in programs. I heard a story on NPR about this, but they went through carefully and slowly, and they eliminated probably just as much, if not more, spending. But it was done in a way where Congress approved. Affected people were there were attempts made to kind of soften the blow and give people time to react. This was so quick that it was just so massive and
hard to track.
Yeah, scary and impossible to track, because the other thing I've seen with those stories is, especially on the federal level, people don't want to talk. If you see your colleagues being cut, do you want to talk to a reporter and put your name out there for stories that ultimately we share our material with anyone who wants it? It could run in a paper, a newspaper, or a TV station in D.C. or New York. Who knows?
Yeah, I'm sure a lot of what you got on that was off the record, and then what you got on the record, it was probably a lot of what you were able to report on was pretty anecdotal.
Yeah, it was. But a lot of it was, there was a woman cut from Wind Cave National Park. She sent me her letter where her job was eliminated. She also sent me the paperwork for her annual review, which was glowing. And this is, a young woman who had studied to be a geologist and was doing everything she could at the park to help people. And for, basically no reason, she just lost her job. So, it was more than anecdotal. Yeah, it's just, it's been a hard thing to cover because it's been happening so quickly and people are reticent to talk because of fear of retaliation.
Yeah. I want to finalize our conversation here. We were talking about this before, that one of the things that you work on, if we could just talk about this broadly, is solutions-based journalism, and that you guys are kind of working on an initiative right now looking at housing. If you could just speak about that broadly, I think it's really an interesting project.
Yeah, no, thanks for asking about that. That's called Engage South Dakota is our name for it. And we're partnering with the Solutions Journalism Network. This is a growing group of journalists who want to just not report on problems, and that's kind of the way things have been for a long time. Well, here's a problem, and you read a story about it, and then, well, good luck to everyone trying to fix it. We're saying, well, where are things working? In addition, so there are problems, and as we know, housing is one of the big three challenges to cities large and small across South Dakota. Housing, workforce, daycare. Those are the things that are holding them back from growth and stability. So we want to look at, well, what's going on with housing and where are things working? And so Wall, you mentioned the Wall story, that's a good example of where they've used a mix of local support, gotten some land on the cheap, and some cities are seeing land donated by companies or individuals, retirees, offloading some land and then developing that. And the other thing that's happening across the state a lot is they're looking at dilapidated homes that have sat there. People are living longer, they're unable to keep their homes up. The homes fall into disrepair, and then they just sit there and they sell for cheap, and someone's got to do it. Someone's got to go in and either fix it up or tear it down. Well, now local governments are getting involved in that and doing that decision of fix up, tear down, and finding ways to rebuild, and municipalities are even developing their own subdivisions. They're providing the infrastructure and clearing the land and building the curb and gutter, and in some cases water and sewer, and then allowing private developers to come in and develop. Keeps the cost of the development down, keeps the cost of the final product, the final finished homes down. And so those are some success stories. And if that works in Aberdeen, and they have a program there called Happy, Homes Are Possible, Inc. That's been duplicated in Mitchell. And now, what's happening in Wall and Redfield. So we're creating reporting on those successes and looking at, well, what worked and how did that specifically work? And then we're creating sort of a depository of information where, say you were a city manager in your small town and you're like, well, we need some housing. I'm not sure how to get going on this. You could go to that website or go to that article, and all the contacts from the stories would be there. You give those people a call, and I'll tell you, they're happy to talk about it. Because
I imagine so. I mean, this is a major issue. I mean, analysis-wise, we're going into this 2026 election, and objectively, not about any specific candidate, but how important of an issue do you think housing is going to be for candidates in South Dakota next year? I mean, you've been covering this area a lot longer than I have.
Well, they're going to say that they want more housing and they want to help develop it. But what we're seeing is that it's less of a federal and state government role and it's happening at the community level. And so whatever they say, I'm not sure how much they can go into a place like Redfield and say, well, we're going to help you identify dilapidated homes and decide how you can get the money to fix those. I think that's the challenge of this, but also the beauty of it is that it's not from on high. It's not from from Congress or even from the state level. These things are bubbling up from the ground level up, and that's what we're trying to capture, because that's where things happen fastest. That's the one thing we're seeing is you can be more creative and quicker, light on your feet as a community to get things done. It still takes several years to develop new housing. But if you wait for the federal government, it just hasn't happened. And so they're seeing that. So they probably, if they get asked, they'll say they support more housing, right? But what are you actually going to do about it? I'm not sure what they can do, and I'm not sure, if candidates have the willpower or the gumption to actually get things done. But I think that's what's
a lot of
cool.
moving parts with that one.
And I think that's what's cool about this project, Engage South Dakota, is we're highlighting those successes, but then bringing together those ideas in a depository where people can go and look and hopefully speed things up in their own towns.
It's an interesting project. I mean, you're a city leader, East River, you're looking at one city out West River maybe in one of your articles, and you're learning from that. So it's pretty cool what you guys are doing. You're really creating kind of a marketplace for some of these city leaders to go and draw some ideas from, which I think is pretty unique.
Yeah, that's well put. I think that's a good summary of what we're trying to do.
Okay, I you might not want to go there, and you don't have to. Do not feel the pressure of the lights, the camera, and the Zero Studio audience here. But is there anything you want to tease? Any of your articles you're working on right now that you'd like to tease, or do you want to play it close to the chest?
Well, I do think, and this is something I think that's been a good thing, is since the attacks on the media and even long prior to COVID, but the deterioration of newspaper circulation and then eventually the closures and or reductions in staff, I think that's made the working media closer and maybe less competitive in the way that I used to try to really put my journalistic foot
Sure.
on a competitor's throat.
Right.
So that's been good, but there still is competition.
Okay.
And there are things that are out there that I'm working on. I will say, I'm working on something about pollution and some good news for the Sioux Falls area that's going to publish next week. And a couple of other things. I'm monitoring the situation down in Igloo, where there's the bunker complex that I exposed problems down there. That's coming up.
That was a great article, by the way. I had just moved here, and was that your article? I had just moved here, and I spent before I came to KOTA. Just so you're aware, I did 3 years of talk radio in Los Angeles at a radio station called KFI, and I came up here with I was in LA and and I read your article. I said, oh my gosh. That was amazing reporting. I can't match that. I mean, that was an incredible article, by the way. And you did some serious digging on that to get a hold of some of these people, I'm sure.
Well, to get them to talk. I mean, they were all under threat of foreclosure or being evicted, and there was, threats of violence down there and that kind of thing. But so I'm keeping an eye on that. That's coming. There's an issue within that coming before the Supreme Court. A couple more housing-related stories, and some healthcare issues that I'm looking into that I think will allow people to look at wherever they live, do a quick search and see what quality level of healthcare they have in their area.
Okay, well, we look forward to all of it. Again, Bart, thank you so much for coming on with us today.
You bet, man.
All right.
Thanks for having me.
You got it. And that will do it for this Political Pulse.